When I walked the Camino Santiago in Spain last year, I found myself living in very close quarters with strangers. I was staying in hostels in double bunk beds every night, often less than a metre away, sometimes even half a metre from the bed next to me, close enough to hear every bit of their snoring as they could probably hear of mine. But I soon became friends with a small group of pilgrims. There was 8 of us from 6 different countries, and we became very close, and there was lots of high fives and hugs at milestones. And in our group, what started as a polite, occasionally asking if, "Oh, your dinner looks nice, could I have a bite of that?" soon became an implied permission that anyone in our group would just reach over the table and grab some of your food, or take your cup or your glass and have a sip from it without even needing to ask. We became that familiar with one another. I found that very confronting to my sense of personal space and personal hygiene. But looking back now, this is one of my favourite memories of the Camino, because it stands out in such stark contrast to how I live my life here in downtown Epping, where we are all so distant generally from one another. I try and be friendly. I try and say hello to strangers in the street, but more often than not, my reply of good morning or hello is met with silence or an averted gaze. And increasingly, people don't even make eye contact. They're looking down at the ground or at the phone in front of their face, earphones in their ears, blocked off from the world. We amble along, maybe in the same direction, but either in our own isolated, soundproof, personal bubbles, disconnected from anybody else around us and their needs. Now, I say this today because we are hearing this weekend the wonderful parable of the Good Samaritan, which Jesus teaches us. It's such a simple, clear parable that even very young children understand the meaning of it. That we are to be like the Samaritan in the parable who bandages the wounds of the injured stranger. It's very, very clear, very straightforward. And yet increasingly, we, I think, are at risk of being not like the Samaritan, but being like the priest who walks past the injured stranger. Now, we have to understand the context, because Jesus' first hearers would have understood this, that the priest was walking to Jerusalem, and that meant he was on his way to go and do his priestly duty in the temple. And that meant he had to be ritually clean, ritually pure. And if he had been come in contact with blood or touched a dead body, which perhaps this injured man might have been, he would have become ritually impure for many days and been unable to do his duty in the temple. So he had, at least to himself, a legitimate reason for walking past that stranger and not helping. I think Jesus' first hearers would have understood that. But the problem is for us that we often think we have the same excuse. The COVID pandemic gave it to us. That for the darkest months of the pandemic, we were also socially isolated from one another. We were told, don't make physical contact with anybody, stay 6 feet away, avoid people. And in the darkest months of the pandemic, when we had no vaccines, no treatments, and a shortage of medical supplies, it made sense. It was the only thing we could do. But now, many years later, we can't keep living like that. Or if we do keep living like that, what kind of life will it be? We will be like the priest thinking, I can't get near people. I've got a good reason. I must protect my health, so I can't come close to any other person. But that both creates an excuse for those of us who maybe had actually been close to other people before but have become more distant. And for people who wanted to kind of keep to themselves anyway, this has given them cover to say, oh no, I've got a medical reason why. But we can't go on living like this. Pope Francis wrote in Fratelli Tutti, his wonderful encyclical, in 2022, just after the depth of the COVID outbreak. He said that when speaking about the pandemic, he said, for all our hyperconnectivity, we witnessed a fragmentation that made it more difficult to resolve problems that affect us all. Things like being the one who helps a stranger in a street. So we have to look around the world and say and recognise that we are so fragmented that if we don't say hello to people, how are we going to know that someone's injured and actually needs help? How will we be present to others? We become increasingly isolated in our airtight apartments, in the bubbles of our cars, or just with our headphones on, phones in front of our face, cut off from the world even when we're walking past a person in the street, which should be the most natural and human of interactions as it has been for thousands and thousands of years. But we found ways to cut ourselves off and divorce ourselves from that. So we need to, be deliberate then about making sure we go out of our way to connect. Not to go and hug every stranger in the street. Please don't do that to me if you see me in the street. But say hello. And if you meet someone you recognise, shake hands. Be willing to at least make some contact with them. We must do this if we are to rehumanize society. If we are to have any hope of being the Good Samaritan to others, then we must do this. See, the thing about the Good Samaritan parable is that it didn't answer the question of how am I to love my neighbour. It's a response to the question which the lawyer asked Jesus, who is my neighbour? And in casting a Samaritan, not a Jew, as the hero of the story, Jesus is broadening out the definition of who our neighbour is. Jesus expanding horizons. And I think we need to do that again now. And it may be around ethnic lines, but chances are it's just around the lines of other people who I don't already know. I have to push myself to reach out to and connect. And so you might notice here in our parish, we do a few things. We welcome you at the front door of the church. Beginning of Mass, we invite you to turn around and say hello to the people near you. We have morning teas after Mass, suppers and barbecues after Mass, and we've just started our community dinners as another way of interacting together, and hopefully not just for our parish, but for the wider Epping community as well. But we need to make it not just here at church. We need to make it part of our lives when we are walking down the street, when we are in any other place, to be open, just to look somebody in the eye and to say good morning, to say hello. The simplest, most basic piece of human interaction may be the re-welding of the connective tissue of our society that needs it so, so much. Jesus' way of bringing people into community offers our fragmented world a very important way forward to bring us to bring the imprint of the kingdom of God into our world here and now. So I'm going to give you one little challenge, and that is here at Mass. When we make the sign of peace, for a long time, the default in Australia was we would shake hands with a person. Of course, during COVID, we stopped shaking hands, we stopped touching people, but we've never officially brought it back. You may notice, though, that I would always go and make the sign of peace physically, shaking hands, at least to the altar service. I invite you to start doing that now. Shake hands with the people around you in church, just a couple of people. If you feel the need to then sanitize your hands before taking communion, great, that's a good thing to do. But at least we begin to reconnect with others, using the safe place of our church community as a starting point that hopefully empowers us to then reach out beyond our church to the wider world. Pope Francis, in the end of Fratelli Tutti, or throughout Fratelli Tutti, then reflects further on the parable of the Good Samaritan, saying, the parable eloquently presents the basic decision we need to make in order to rebuild our wounded world in the face of so much pain and suffering. He said, the only course is to imitate the Good Samaritan. Any other decision would make us one of the robbers or one of those who walk by without showing compassion for the suffering man on the roadside. So join me in trying to connect with one another here at this church and in the wider world.